I can still feel my hands shaking when I hit that delete button for all those weekly payments. $700. Every single week. To my parents. And for what, exactly? Just so they could skip my daughter's 6th birthday party, and my father could throw a sentence at me over the phone. A sentence that still echoes painfully in every corner of my soul. Your child doesn't exist for us. I can hardly believe this only happened a month ago. Back then I thought it was the worst day of my life. I was so naive. My name is Scarlett. I'm 33 years old and I have a daughter, Ava, who just turned 6. My life, frankly, has never been easy. After Ava's father left before she was even born, I was left alone trying to put all the pieces back together. It was hard, but I always knew who I was striving for. Ava is everything I have. She is my world. My parents, Michael and Patricia, have always been complicated. After they lost their jobs a few years ago, I became their main financial pillar. Not that they put up much of a fight. After all, I'm their only daughter. My brother Ryan is 5 years older, lives in Colorado with his wife, and we don't talk often. I guess I just felt it was my responsibility. I covered their bills, ordered groceries for them every Sunday, and sent cash whenever they asked, and usually even when they didn't. If they had trouble with rent or car insurance, I always bailed them out. I even gave up the idea of moving to a bigger, better place for Ava just to make sure they had enough. I didn't ask for much. Just for them to be part of Ava's life. To visit her sometimes, play with her, show at least some interest. But even that was too much. Ever since Ava was born, I felt something was broken between us. My father barely looked at her when I first brought her home from the hospital. My mother held her like she was doing me a huge favor. They never tried to bond with her, even when I begged them to babysit for a few hours so I could finally get some sleep. They always had an excuse. At first, the phrases were harmless, something like "we're tired," or "we have plans." But over time their excuses got sharper, crueler. When Ava turned 3, my mom declared that she looks too much like her father, and since he left before she was even born, Ava is very difficult to love. Can you imagine? I almost dropped the phone. I should have cut them off right then, but I didn't. I convinced myself it was just bitterness, that they missed the life they thought I should have had. I thought if I kept supporting them, they would come around. They would understand. I kept paying their bills. I ordered their groceries every Sunday. I sent money even when they didn't ask. Ava deserved a grandmother and grandfather, even if they were like this. I wanted her to have a complete family, even if I had to pay for it. I was willing to ignore their indifference, their coldness, just so they would stay in her life. Last Saturday, Ava turned 6. She wore her sparkly pink dress and danced around the backyard like she was on a stage. We had cupcakes, lemonade in mason jars, and cheap decorations that still managed to create a festive atmosphere. Her little friends came with presents wrapped in shiny paper, and one of their moms even stayed to help me set up. But Ava kept glancing at the gate the whole time. Every 10 minutes she asked if Nana and Grandpa were coming. I told her, "Maybe. We'll see." And I hated myself for saying it because I already knew the answer. They never came. That evening, after I put Ava to bed and washed the icing out of her hair, I sat on the couch staring at my phone. I scrolled through the messages. That morning my mom had texted, "Tell Ava happy birthday from us." And that was it. No call, no card, no gift, not even a video message. And this was after I had sent them $700 that same Monday like I had every week for the past 8 months. I called them. I didn't think it through. I just needed to hear them. Hear their latest excuse. My dad picked up. He sounded annoyed. I asked why they didn't come. That was it. No yelling. No hysterics. And he said, "Your child doesn't exist for us." I froze. I don't know what I expected him to say, but it wasn't that. After a pause, he hung up. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call back. I just went to my bank app, opened the list of scheduled payments, and deleted every single one. Then I sat back down, still shaking a little, and let the realization sink in. 35 minutes. That's how long it took after I deleted the payments for the first text to arrive. Not an apology. Not a panicked call asking if everything was okay. Just a casual, entitled request from my mom, Patricia. "Can you order us dinner? Nothing fancy, just Chinese or something. There's no food in the house." I stared at the message, the sheer audacity of it, and I didn't respond. I couldn't. The shaking hadn't entirely stopped, but now it felt less like fear and more like a core-deep righteous tremor. I'd been shaking for 40 minutes, not from the cold of losing my parents, but from the sudden warmth of setting myself free. That first night after the shock wore off, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. I wasn't crying over the $700 a week, or the lost chance for Ava to have proper grandparents. I was crying for the little girl I used to be, the one who believed that if she was good enough, paid enough, and sacrificed enough, her parents would finally see her. They didn't see me, and they certainly didn't see Ava. They saw a resource, a bank account with a face attached. When Michael said those words, "Your child doesn't exist for us," he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was simply stating a fact, the truth of their transactional relationship with me. And that fact, cold and hard as concrete, was what finally broke the cycle. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. Ava went to school, oblivious to the emotional nuclear war that had just detonated in my personal life. She talked about the presents her friends gave her, about the pink princess cake, and every time she smiled, I felt a fresh wave of determination. This was exactly why I did it. To protect that smile from people who valued a cheap dinner over a child's heart. On Tuesday morning, the silence was finally broken. My mom called. Not from her usual number, but from my dad's cell. I answered, bracing myself. Her voice was sharp, a little strained, but still dripping with the usual condescension. "Scarlett, where is the rent money? The landlord called. Did you forget to send it on time?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. "I didn't forget, Mom," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "I deleted the payments. They're gone. There won't be any more money for rent, for groceries, for anything." There was a silence on the line, a long pregnant pause that wasn't shock, but genuine disbelief. She actually laughed, a short, nasty little sound. "Oh, stop it, Scarlett. This is ridiculous. You know you can't do that. Don't be melodramatic. We'll talk about this later. Just send the money now before you get us evicted." "No," I repeated, the word firm. "I'm serious. It's over. I'm no longer supporting you." "You will come crawling back," she snapped, the amusement gone, replaced by pure venom. "You always do. You think you can just abandon us? After everything we did for you? You think you're going to make us homeless over some silly birthday party?" "It wasn't a silly party," I cut in, my voice finally rising a fraction. "It was my daughter's 6th birthday, and you both told me she doesn't exist to you. If she doesn't exist, then neither does my obligation to you. You made your choice." She started screaming then, not crying but screaming, accusing me of being selfish, ungrateful, and a cold-hearted daughter. I didn't engage. I just waited for the torrent of abuse to pass, and when she finally paused to breathe, I hung up. I immediately blocked their numbers and all their known email addresses. I was done negotiating with terrorists. What they couldn't possibly understand, what they had been blind to for years, was that they weren't just losing their weekly allowance. They were losing the carefully constructed image of victimhood that had kept their lives afloat. They had always relied on the narrative of the sacrificing parents whose children just didn't appreciate them. That narrative was about to be challenged, and they were about to realize they had underestimated everyone, especially me. Wednesday morning brought a strange development. A call came from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail while I was making Ava's favorite star-shaped sandwiches for lunch. It turned out to be the landlord, a polite man named Mr. Davison. He was a little nervous. He said the rent hadn't arrived yet, and he was just checking in because I had always been so reliable. That phrase, reliable, stopped me cold. I had become their reliable tenant, covering the bills for a place I didn't even live in. I called him back. I explained, clearly and calmly, that I would not be making any further payments, and that all future communication and rent had to come directly from my parents. He was silent for a second, like he was processing a very uncomfortable truth, realizing he had been dealing with a grown child funding her parents' lifestyle. He thanked me and hung up. That night, my mom sent a text from a burner number I hadn't blocked yet. No greeting, no question. Just, "So you're seriously leaving us with nothing? Are you proud of yourself?" It was the classic guilt trip designed to make me doubt myself. I blocked that number too. I didn't need their manufactured shame. I was too busy feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. But the real game changer came when I finally spoke to my brother, Ryan. He lives so far away, and our relationship is based on surface-level updates. I knew I had to tell him everything, from the birthday no-show to my father's disgusting comment and the subsequent cutoff. I called him that afternoon. I laid it all out, not leaving anything out, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. There was a long silence on his end. Then he simply said, "It's about time, Scarlett. Someone needed to hold them accountable." My heart lurched. "What do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated, then the truth tumbled out. "I've been sending them money too. Not as much as you, nowhere near $700 a week, but enough. Enough for their cell phone bill, extra groceries, car repairs." I was stunned. I had no idea. "I never told you," Ryan continued, his voice tight, "because I didn't want you to think I didn't trust you to handle it. Truth is, I thought maybe if both of us kept supporting them, they'd eventually soften, open their hearts to Ava. I kept hoping." He paused, a sigh thick with years of disappointment. "It's clear now, Scarlett. They never will. We were just their dual ATM system." That was the turning point. It wasn't just my battle anymore. The two of us, separated by distance but united by the same deep-seated resentment and betrayal, were finally on the same page. And what my parents didn't realize was that when they cut themselves off from Ava, they didn't just lose their income stream. They united the very people they had manipulated for years. And Ryan, unlike me, was direct, unforgiving, and much less concerned about keeping up appearances. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, the manipulative calls, the frantic voicemails, and the carefully crafted shame texts began to roll in. They were desperate, but their desperation was fueled not by love for their children, but by the fear of losing their comfort. And that's when I knew absolutely that I had done the right thing. The month had just begun, and the real conflict was just about to explode, thanks to the combined shock of their two income sources finally drying up. They were isolated, financially stranded, and they were furious. I was ready to face the storm. The quiet didn't last. Ryan's cutting them off added a seismic layer to the situation they hadn't anticipated. They could handle one ungrateful daughter. They couldn't handle the united front of both their children. Ryan, bless his straightforward heart, didn't bother with silent blocking. He called them back and laid out the facts. Their behavior toward Ava was disgusting, unacceptable, and he was done enabling them. He told them they were on their own. My mother, Patricia, was absolutely hysterical. She managed to find me on a hidden messaging app one barely used. The sheer effort they put into finding me was exhausting. Her message was a rambling, tear-filled, furious indictment. She accused me of poisoning Ryan against them, of ruining the family, of being a cold-hearted schemer. I read it once, didn't respond, and blocked that account too. I wasn't going to justify myself. The narrative they were clinging to, that I was the selfish one, was their only defense mechanism. But their desperation quickly morphed into something uglier and more calculated. They didn't just want the money back. They wanted to maintain their image in the community. They had always been deeply involved in their church and a number of local volunteer groups, places where they could play the role of the caring, but struggling older couple. They knew losing the money would mean losing the status that money bought them. By the end of that week, just 5 days after Ava's party, the first true threat arrived. It came as an email to my personal work address, which felt like a massive invasion of my privacy. The subject line was chilling. "The truth about your financial arrangements." I opened it, my hands clammy. It was from Michael. It was meticulously written. Not a frantic text, but a formal letter designed to inflict maximum damage. He didn't ask for the money back. He went straight for the blackmail. He wrote that he had kept a detailed ledger of every single payment I had ever made to them, stretching back years, including the amounts I sent to cover their medical bills, the rent, and especially the emergency cash drops. He even detailed the circumstances, painting a picture that made it look like I was the one paying them off to keep quiet about something. The threat was clear. "Unless the weekly support is reinstated immediately," he wrote, "we will be forced to share this information with your employer, your friends, and the community groups you rely on. We will explain how you, a single mother, have been trying to bankrupt your own parents out of spite. People will finally understand the truth about your character, and the level of manipulation you are capable of. Do you really want to risk your reputation, Scarlett? Do you want your work colleagues to know how unstable you truly are? I slumped in my chair, physically sick. They weren't threatening to expose my cruelty. They were threatening to expose the very reality of our toxic relationship, twisting the facts just enough to make me look insane. They knew I worked in a professional field where stability and reputation mattered. They were going for the jugular. It was pure emotional and financial blackmail dressed up as a moral grievance. I immediately called Ryan. I was shaking, tears welling up not from sadness, but from overwhelming rage that they could stoop this low. "They're threatening my job, Ryan," I choked out, reading him the email verbatim. "They're going to make me look like I'm extorting them." Ryan was silent for a moment. Then his voice came through, cold and hard. "I told you, Scar. They're panicking. But this is actually good. They've finally overplayed their hand. This isn't just threatening to make you look bad. This is a crime. But we aren't going to call the police yet. We're going to let them think they have the upper hand." He told me his plan. He had already called our Aunt Virginia, our father's older sister, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper moral compass. Ryan was convinced that if we could get just one respected member of the extended family on our side, their entire house of cards would collapse. "They care more about what Aunt Virginia thinks than what we think," Ryan explained. "They need her validation. I've told her the story from the birthday to the cutoff. I haven't mentioned the blackmail yet. I'm waiting for them to push one step further." I spent the next 2 days walking on eggshells, constantly checking my work email, waiting for the public exposure, bracing for the inevitable. The tension was suffocating. Every time my phone rang, I flinched, convinced it was my boss calling to ask why my parents were sending him thinly veiled threats. The fear wasn't about the job, but about the shame they were trying to attach to me, the shame of being the child of people so broken they would try to destroy me. On Friday it got worse. Patricia took the confrontation one step further. She didn't send another email. She posted a cryptic, manipulative status update on Facebook. It was a photo of a single crumpled $10 bill. The caption read, "When your own blood shows you what you're really worth. Some people will do anything to erase you when you stop being useful. We have a story to tell, and it's time everyone hears it." It was vague enough not to violate any platform rules, but specific enough to be understood by anyone who knew them or me. My cousin started commenting, asking if everything was okay. Patricia played the perfect victim, responding with vague hints about betrayal and deep family secrets. The emotional pressure was mounting, and I knew absolutely that the quiet, devastating move Ryan was planning with Aunt Virginia was the only way to neutralize this pathetic public performance. The deadline my father had set for the money was Monday. The clock was ticking down to a full-blown family catastrophe. The tension was so thick I could practically taste it. Monday morning arrived, the deadline Michael had set for reinstating the support payments. I went to work, but I was useless. I couldn't focus on anything but the fear that my phone would buzz with a notification showing his blackmail email had been sent to my entire professional contact list. The expected financial threat never landed. Instead, a new level of emotional manipulation began. Around noon, my cousin Natalie messaged me. She didn't mention the cryptic Facebook post, but her tone was urgent. "Scarlett, your parents showed up at Aunt Virginia's house this morning. Unannounced. They're sitting on her porch, refusing to leave until she talks to them. They look awful. Like they haven't slept in days." I froze. Aunt Virginia. The one person whose opinion they genuinely feared. This wasn't a public meltdown. This was a desperate, calculated maneuver to get validation from the family matriarch before Ryan and I could completely isolate them. They were trying to secure a moral high ground. I immediately called Ryan. He was already aware. "They're circling the wagons, Scar," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "They know I talked to Aunt Virginia. They're trying to preempt the judgment. We have to act now." Ryan's plan suddenly changed. He decided the time for quiet diplomacy was over. He was done waiting for them to push further. He was done being subtle. He was going to expose the whole truth, but not just to Aunt Virginia, to the whole immediate family, and he was going to use their own words to do it. "I need you to send me the screenshot of that one text, the one from your mom's burner phone," Ryan instructed. "Are you proud of yourself?" 1. And the last text from Dad. I did it instantly. Ryan hung up and went to work. Less than an hour later, the whole narrative shifted. I got a series of frantic calls and texts from various cousins. Ryan hadn't just spoken to Aunt Virginia. He had sent a mass email to every one of our adult cousins, our aunts and uncles, titled, "The Full Truth About Michael and Patricia and Ava." The email wasn't emotional. It was a lawyer's brief of betrayal. He laid out the years of financial support I provided. He detailed the birthday no-show. He then included the texts I had sent him, showing my desperation and final decision. And here came the turning point, the moral dilemma that stripped my parents bare. Ryan attached 2 key pieces of evidence. The text from my father, Michael, after I asked why they didn't come to the party. "Your child doesn't exist for us." A screenshot of my father's recent blackmail email to my work address, detailing the threat to destroy my career unless I reinstated the money. This combination was devastating. It showed the family not just that my parents were neglectful, but that they were actively, aggressively trying to ruin their daughter's life because they lost their allowance. It turned their victimhood narrative on its head. The immediate reaction was chaos. My phone blew up. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, not with judgment, but with sympathy and shock. They couldn't believe the level of cruelty. Ryan had successfully bypassed my parents' version of events and laid the cold, hard facts out for the jury. But the most critical call came from Aunt Virginia. She called me directly, her voice strained with disappointment, not anger at me, but a deep sadness for her brother. "Scarlett," she said softly, "they just left. I told them they needed to go. I read everything Ryan sent. I knew they were difficult, but this is calculated malice. To use your child's existence as a weapon, and then threaten your livelihood? That is unforgivable." She paused, and then she delivered the final blow that would seal my parents' fate. "They just told me, Scarlett, a different story about why they didn't come to the birthday party. They told me you specifically uninvited them because you found out they needed money, and you didn't want to be associated with their poverty. They lied to me. To my face. After what I just read." I felt a dizzying mix of validation and disgust. They had created 2 separate, contradictory narratives, one for me where Ava didn't exist and one for the family, where I was the monster who disowned them. The evidence Ryan provided now made both narratives crumble. Aunt Virginia promised to do something about it. She didn't say what, but I knew given her standing it would be far more effective than anything Ryan or I could do. The moral dilemma suddenly shifted entirely. It was no longer about whether I should have paid them, or whether I was wrong to cut them off. The decision now was whether to step back and let the family, led by the matriarch, deliver the consequences, or to engage directly in the public spectacle my parents had started. Do I maintain my dignified silence, or do I use this wave of family support to finally, completely, and permanently destroy their public image? I felt the need to protect Ava from any future attempts at contact, but revenge felt dangerously close. I didn't want revenge, I wanted peace. But peace, I realized, might require a final decisive act of war. The stage was set. My parents were cornered, having just lied to the one person they needed most. The climax was inevitable. The confrontation at Aunt Virginia's house was the catalyst, but the real climax unfolded publicly, exactly where my parents had started their manipulative campaign. On social media and within the tight-knit family circle. They couldn't control the narrative anymore because Ryan had given the jury, the family, the irrefutable evidence. Aunt Virginia didn't call them out in a huge family meeting. She did something quieter, sharper, and much more definitive. She sent a letter. A physical, typed and signed letter. She mailed copies not only to my parents but to every single relative who had been included in Ryan's email chain. I didn't ask what it said, but a few days later my mother, Patricia, broke through the blockades again, sending a message from yet another new number. It wasn't an apology. It was a photo of a crumpled, tear-stained piece of paper, the letter laid out on their dining table. Below the picture, one sentence. "I hope you're happy now." I didn't reply. Ryan called me that night. Aunt Virginia had sent him a copy of the letter too. We read it together over the phone. It wasn't angry. That's what made it so devastating. It was calm, surgical, laying out the facts like a judge reading a sentence. She referenced the years of my financial support, their refusal to acknowledge Ava, and the final ugly act of threatening my job. She included the exact quote from my father, "Michael, your child doesn't exist for us." Then came the final paragraph, the definitive break. "Forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. You are no longer part of this family, not because we disowned you, but because you chose to disown a child. The line has been drawn, and you are standing on the wrong side of it." That line spread like wildfire. By Sunday, they were officially cut out of every family group chat. Old friends unfriended them. Their attempt at financial blackmail and public victimhood had completely backfired, leaving them isolated not by me but by their own community. However, the deepest relief came not from the family's actions, but from my own. I had to ensure that this was permanent, not just social. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to build a concrete wall around Ava. It was a Tuesday morning, a little over 3 weeks since the party. I walked into my lawyer's office with Ava beside me, quietly coloring a picture of a rainbow. She didn't know why we were there. I filed for a no-contact order, limited, specific, and permanent. It would block them from school visits, from medical decisions, from ever being able to claim grandparent rights in court. Ava's name was included, protected alongside mine. We sent the documents via certified mail, a final cold statement. "Do not contact me or my daughter again. Any attempt will be considered a violation and pursued legally. This is not punishment. It's protection." I expected an explosion, one final desperate scream. But there was nothing. A week passed. Then a month. No calls, no letters, no cryptic Facebook accounts trying to add me. Nothing. The silence was the strangest thing. For so long, their noise, the demands, the guilt, the passive aggression had filled every space in my life. Now, for the first time in years, it was quiet. And in that quiet, something unexpected happened. Ava started smiling more. Not the big, performative smiles, but the real ones. The ones she gave when she caught me watching her color. When she asked if we could bake cookies just because. When she ran into Ryan's arms during his visit and called him her bonus dad. We were building something, finally, without interference. A few weeks later, Aunt Virginia invited us and Ryan's family over for a Sunday lunch. It wasn't a family reunion. It was a quiet reclaiming of space. We sat around a big mismatched table with homemade food. Ava, wearing a sunflower dress, handed Aunt Virginia a folded piece of paper. A drawing of the whole family, including Ryan and his wife. No one spoke about Michael or Patricia. Their names were absent, their presence erased. As I watched Ava laugh, truly unrestrainedly laugh, I realized the ultimate truth about what had happened. They chose to walk away. They chose their version of pride, the twisted, selfish narrative of victimhood, over the reality of love. They decided that if they couldn't control the story, they would rather be written out of it entirely. And I wrote them out. Not just legally but emotionally. I stopped wondering what they'd say when Ava hit a milestone. I stopped hoping they'd change. They won't. The real revenge wasn't the confrontation or the lawsuit. It was the quiet life that went on without them. A happy child, a peaceful home, and the family that chose to stay. I learned that sometimes the most profound act of love is the painful decision to cut the toxic ties, allowing the space for true connection to finally grow. They are isolated, alone, and watching it all from the outside, knowing they traded the warmth of their daughter and granddaughter for a few $100s a week. And that, I realized, is their eternal sentence.